All right, welcome everyone to our Committee of the Whole meeting on August 16th, 2023. Before we begin, I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we are gathered today on ancestral unceded territory as Pastumacati people. All right. Can I have a mover and seconder to approve the agenda before you this evening? I saw Councillor Wright and Deputy Mayor Wheaton. Okay. Any questions? Oh, I forgot. I didn't even look at you. We're all up there. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye. No question.
All right. Thanks.
Aye.
All right. Okay. Thank you. All right. So we'll move right into new business, and it's a community alert system. And which is a pretty hot topic lately on the news too. So we'll, what are you going to sell us here first there, Jeff? We'll go from there.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Greenlaw has been championing some work on the community alert system since previous discussions talked about my clear desire for the municipalities to have access to the national alert system, the Alert Ready system. And perhaps coincidentally, the unfortunate events in Nova Scotia have alerted that government, provincial government, to the fact that perhaps decentralization of the authorities over that system would be a public benefit. Indications from our government remain to indicate that we are not sophisticated enough to have access to this important tool. So in the meantime, my deputy CAO and I have begun researching other alert systems that we could bring in under our control. As recently as 12:30 this afternoon, Mr. Morton and I had a really good conversation with a service provider that we're both quite impressed with. Relatively low cost to the municipality on a subscription basis year to year. And one of the things that I really liked about the program is it's linked into both the Alert Ready national system already. It comes pre-alerted, so anything that the RCMP, Amber Alerts, whatever, go out into there would automatically bounce through our local system. And they've already been working on, because they have Nova Scotia clients, they're prepared to have the system so that if the Nova Scotia clients get access to the Alert Ready national system, they'll be able to do their alerts through both systems on one entry. It's already going to go both, and it'll blanket everything. So that was really nice. The other thing is it also automatically picks up all Environment Canada warnings, and without us entering any data into the system, anything. If it's issued, it's automatically gone. We don't have to intervene at all. It automatically goes out to all the subscribers. And Sean asked about the little lady who's not technologically inclined. How do they get alerted? It'll also do an automatic auto dial to the landlines or whatever number you've put into the system. With the automated message, reads you out this is a boil water order from the municipality. Here's what you need to do. So it would call all those at the same time. So blanket coverage. It would also automatically feed our social media outlets. Like, it's one-stop shopping. Like I said, probably I'm taking a look at it tomorrow. I'll take a closer look, but probably we could get it up and running or get the process started this year, because I do think I have enough money to get a subscription going right away. It's relatively cheap, and we'd be able to roll this out in short order. So I think there's this one and another vendor that's also very popular with some of our colleagues in the area, and each have pros and cons. But I think the connection to the Alert Ready system, it's the only one in Canada that's linked to that system right now, and the automatic feed of the Environment Canada stuff is huge selling features for us. And it's really no risk. It's your 1 year subscription for I think it was 5 of us that would have access to it internally, and give it a go. And so I think we're pretty content with the idea, and look like we'll be able to get that off and rolling right quick. And hopefully UMNB and those kind of folks do lobby on our behalf to get access to the main system, because that is a bigger tool that when you need it, you can deploy it. So that's our update on that system. I think Councilor Greenwald's got his hand up here.
So, yeah,
It's probably going to take at least a year before you'd ever get the government around to letting us use the Ready Alert system anyway. So that at least we'll have something in place. So on this one, do the people have to actually register? Right? Because a Ready Alert doesn't matter. Just comes to your phone, right? You don't have a choice. This one here, do you have to register? Yeah. That's fine though, yeah.
I got a follow-up.
so, I just hit the button, sorry. But that was one of the things, because we did have the Sentinel and no one registered. I know it takes a bad moment to heighten it and get people on board, but maybe we can build on what just happened in Nova Scotia and get the importance of people getting that service and how important it is just to sign up. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you. Yes, there will obviously be some registration required. The company does provide a number of tools as far as the promotional type stuff. They have a guidebook on different tactics and on how to get out into the community to get people registered. Deputy CNO and I have talked, as we're in the middle of budget season right now, of potentially even budgeting for a couple of summer students to go literally door to door and try and get those initial signups. The one thing I do think this company has going for it is that connection to Environment Canada, because we may send out alerts for critical things very rarely. And so it ends up being one of those dead apps on your phone that you don't realize, you're not using very much. But when Environment Canada stuff is coming on a regular basis, and the way this is set up, it has different levels of alerts, and it has critical, like wildfire, here's your important stuff, and there's routine, which is council meeting tomorrow night at 6 o'clock, or you still use the same system, but it's a green level instead of a red level. So because it gives us a mechanism to constantly feed, then it ends up, we believe, that it's going to end up with people more inclined to keep their information up to date because they're used to getting that constant feedback. So if their email does change or their phone number does change, they're more inclined to, oh, how come I haven't gotten an alert? Oh, geez, I forgot to update that, right? So yeah, we do think there are tactics there to get greater buy-in from the public.
I just want to make one comment just to follow up. I don't want the crying wolf thing to happen either, though. You don't want an alert that's, if it's not alert worthy, but do you want to be calling the person that doesn't have internet to pick up the phone and say there's council meeting tonight, for example? How would you, go ahead.
So each of the alerts you can use, you can customize your alert levels and your alert types, right? So if it's just a council meeting, it might not go to every phone number in the right, but it's a matter of saying, here it is, but if it's a heat warning or something from Environment Canada, you probably do want that going out potentially. Also, the user at the end, the person on this end, when they register and stuff, have the opportunity to say, I don't want to know about thunderstorm watches. They just turn that, if we issue one or it's Environment Canada, it just won't go. The user gets to control the data that's coming to them. So, but they can also, because this is a very wide system, if they have family in British Columbia, they can say, I want to know about alerts, weather alerts in Kamloops, and they'll get it because the system is that big. So it's very customizable to the user end, so they're not getting things that they don't want to have bombarding their phone or their email or whatever system they're using.
Sean, go ahead.
Jeff said most of what I was going to. Oh, sorry. Jeff said most of what I was going to say, but in my past experience, we hired summer students, got the vast majority of a community on board, and then it died. Because they weren't getting alerts, their email changes, their phone numbers changed. There was no motivation for them to call in and say, hey, I got a new cell phone number. But like Jeff had said, some people, they'll get addicted to Environment Canada warnings. They'll want to know when it stops coming, oh, I got to update my app. So I was pleased to see that there was that addictive aspect to it, where you're gonna go to that and use it for more than that once every 10-year flood event or whatever. Because if that's all you set it up to work for, it won't work. It'll work great the first year, but eventually people just fall off, and then you're back down to 15 or 20% users, and it's not effective.
Any other comments? Emily? Or Councilor Rodas, sorry.
The thing I really like about this is it sounds like from a time management perspective that there's so much cost savings. Like if we're purchasing a subscription to this app, that's going to give you guys back a lot of time as staff to not have to, issue boil orders and get everything ready to go and go door knocking. So, and I do like the fact that the accountability is on the resident in terms of like, if you're registered for the app, you get it. But if you're also not interested in getting any alerts, you just don't get the app and that's it. My other question would be from a protective service standpoint, if there was like a fire in a specific area or you wanted to alert like only one specific area of the community, are you able to do that too, where it doesn't have to go to the whole municipality, but maybe just Ward 2 residents or Ward 3?
Yeah, so my understanding from the system, we haven't had a full-scale demo on it yet, is that you can geofence it. We can also, it even has a system, an internal only option. So if I need to get something out to all of council and senior management because we're setting up an EOC and I need you all here now, I can broadcast that through the program to all of you at once and not have to call Councilor Greenlaw and like have someone chasing or whatever. And the only people who get it is you and I know that it's closed, right? So that's another nice feature of this program too, is to have customizable groups. So we can set up, a specific water route or a specific to say, yeah, this only applies to over there, and just do that. So it is very customizable that way as well.
Okay, any other comments, questions, input? All right, everyone seemed like it's a good system?
And what we have right now?
Yes, yeah, that's better than what we have right now. No. Anyway, I appreciate the work that you and Wade and Sean have done on that, and thank you for the presentation, and we'll see where this goes when you bring it to fruition. All right. So next, we've got the Community Safety Standing Committee. Okay, you've all seen the terms of the committee. And any questions or comments on the terms of the committee? Okay. Yeah, so now what you gotta do is we gotta build a committee, which we had a short discussion before this evening, and we'll have to, we'll reach out to the people that made the cut and see if they're definitely interested, and we'll share with them the terms as well and get that going. So really, any is there any comments or questions from council on that? No? Well, I guess we talked enough about it already, of course. So yeah. So yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Just from the administrative side, I was quite pleased. I think we had a bit of a slow start to the letters of interest coming in when we first got everything out the door. And all of a sudden it came in quite quickly, a good number of them. So kudos to the community members who are willing to step forward. It's not a small task. This is what in the industry we call a wicked problem. There's not easy solutions. And for people to be willing to step up and help their community tackle wicked problems is a big deal, and it should be recognized as such. So I want to express the appreciation of administration to those folks. The terms of reference you mentioned, Your Worship, there was a link to the terms of reference with the ad for the expressions of interest, so hopefully people had a chance to review that before they put their name in. Yeah, so I think we had a good number for council to consider. And I'll work with your office, Your Worship, to help contact people if in any way you need. But we should be seeing those people who put their names forward should be getting responses in the very near future from either yourself or my office as to their standing on the application, I think.
I'm gonna hit the green button here. Okay, so thank you. So we'll leave that at that, and we'll start moving forward on that. And then it'll be, you'll have to build it anyway. It'll take some adjustment as we get going. Right, next up. Why is that going small? Municipally owned land. You saw the discussion report on that. And then you also saw the breakdown of all the yeses and nos and all that sort of thing. So I guess that's all going to be work in progress. I'll actually ask Jeff, who did all the work on that, or his staff there. Go ahead, Jeff. Or Sean.
Sean's pointing at me, yeah. Now, this one came out of my office. There's a lot of times staring at spreadsheets and PIDs to look at where properties are. A couple of good things came out of this project. One, we learned a lot more about the land that we actually own. There's some really interesting pieces of property that are out there that we own. There's interesting pieces of property that some of our agencies that we work with own that I think we have to do some sorting out of some things, like Future St. Stephen. But that's another thing. It was a long process. What's in your report is the summary. It doesn't even show all the parcels because a lot of them were 3 feet wide by 4 feet long remnants of parcels of roads that were realigned and things like that. So I didn't even include those, but I did look at every one of them. So you got 150 or whatever entries there. The criteria, they were designed, as you may recall, council kind of looked at us and said, come up with the criteria, apply them blindly. So for a best practice, in this case, I turned to our friends in Halifax, who are dealing with significant homelessness and encampments, and found a CAO's report from Mr. Jacques Dubé, who was the former city manager there. And they talked about how they approached allowing or not allowing encampments within their parks and green spaces specifically. But the criteria, I thought made a lot of sense as far as where you really don't want things, where it might be okay, but it's a little inconvenient versus what, is preferable. And it had a nice balance between protecting current users and the purposes of certain spaces, versus, for lack of a better term, the dignity of an encampment space. The site privacy being to a certain level a positive thing if you can find it. So I thought it was very, very well balanced. There was no weighting on any criteria being more important than the other. I figured that was for the committee and council to really wrap your heads around what's more important. But I wanted to put as many facts in front of you. And as you had said, do it blindly. Don't worry about whose neighborhood it's in or whatever. So you'll see the document that you've been provided has stripped the PIDs off of it, has stripped the descriptions. We have raw data that we know what each of those sites is. And so my goal was to get it in front of you, allow you to deliberate on either the weighting or whatever was intriguing. And then if there was 4 or 5 sites that, based on your review, kind of we would like to look a little closer at these specific ones, then we as administration can go do a more in-depth review of these sites, go out, do pictures, take a look, look at it more on the ground, ground truth them. But you're doing it just like you were instructing me to do it, kind of blindly, not worrying about the NIMBY of it. I mean, for all you know, it could be a piece of property that's right next to your house. So it's a nice way to avoid that element, which is something that you had decided you wanted to avoid in the early stages. So that was the approach. It was a big task. I know some of the councillors at one point last month, I think it was, asked me how it was progressing, and I pulled out my laptop and we showed him the giant spreadsheet that I'm like, I'm working on it, honest, but it's a lot of data and it's a lot of individual things to look at. But it finally came to fruition, and so I'm glad to put it in front of you. We seek your guidance on whether you want to make that decision tonight, whether you want more time to review, whether if you guys want us to apply some kind of weighting of one criteria over another, we can do that. So this is, you asked for data, we brought it back, hopefully in line with what you were seeking from us.
Any questions, council? Council Greenlaw?
So I'd sent something earlier, I didn't even get a chance to see it, but, you know, on the weighting, I can see some things we may be able to get around, like proximity to water. You might be able to bring tanks in or something like that. So those aren't deal breakers. One of the ones I looked at was the degree to which safety could be established. So I just need a little more elaboration on what you mean by that.
When we look at site safety, much of it had, many of the properties that were originally kind of earmarked, not too bad on other elements, were very close to critical infrastructure, which was I deemed as to be a safety element, whether that's the water tower, a pump house, whatever. Pretty much anything involving our critical infrastructure for water and sewer systems. And the other thing we looked at was proximity to, if it had a drop off, a cliff, up against the river, perhaps, because, without generalizing the nature of those environments, I mean, we know certain activities take place and certain risk management issues become elevated in those kind of areas. So we wanted to make sure if we can we easily block off a safety hazard or not? And that's kind of where it's coming from. It'll be easier to do when we're doing a more in-depth look at it at a site, because I'm largely was doing this from satellite imagery and the property assessment online data that I had in my office. So it's you're doing your best guess and talking to Sean, saying, what do you know about this property? Because you've probably been there that I haven't, but we didn't go ground truth, right? So that's where the philosophy of it was, is are there other hazards outside of the normal hazards that might come with tenting and campfires and that might be present in the area.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I had a question from good work. Actually, I know this is like it's a satellite level kind of investigation right now. But I had a question because of the number of properties that we own, and I know that, but this includes like everything you put in there. Like it might include like 5 Kings or something, right? Would it? Because that's a property we own. That's what I tried to explain, and I assumed that's what it was, but I wanted to clarify that. So it's every little bit of property, except for those ones you said that are 5 by 7 and whatever, the smaller ones. Yeah.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. It was I had our friends over at the RSC Planning Division out of their GIS system pulled every piece of property that was under the ownership of the Municipal District of St. Stephen and listed, and we laid them out in an Excel sheet. There are a number of those properties that this site is not, it would not be suitable, are things like 5 Kings, 199 Union, which is the fire hall. They're a lot of those things are like that. I did my best to not eliminate, put the ones that say not suitable. They're very clearly not suitable. Even if it was just an inconvenience, I left it on the list. A Dover Park. Yes, there'd be lots of conflict with current users. Yes, it's a horticultural area. Yes, it would not score well on a lot of those criteria. It's listed there because, while it may be an inconvenience, it may end up being the best spot that we have. So to get over the line of not suitable, I was pretty stringent on that, and it was things like, the GCC lot itself, or the courtyard in between the library and 5 Kings and things like that. But if it was at all potentially usable, I left it on the list.
Council Rodas?
Yeah, I want to thank you, Jeff. This is excellent. Like, that's a lot of work, and I actually love the fact it's blind for counselors, so we can really make decisions without 100% being biased or knowing, and I know I communicated that before, so that's awesome. My question would be, too, is I know in Fredericton, I've spoken with some colleagues there who found that when they didn't necessarily dedicate per se, but allowed a space to be used, sometimes what they were finding is that it became too much of a long-term space, so they actually seemed to find different spots, and they worked with their bylaw officers to kind of show up and say, okay, it's been 1 week here, we're going to ask that you move to this next spot, and then after 1 more week, and they said that really helped deter like the permanent long-term encampment site. So no spot is super ideal, and that way it didn't disrupt the neighbors for long periods of time. You know, it was kind of in short stints, so it's a reality of the housing crisis, but it's not impacting. So if there were maybe like 4 or 5 properties on here that matched up and kind of leveled out to be the least disruptive, could that be part of our would protective services maybe be able to support us in ensuring it's not a long-term spot, I guess? You know, if we end up choosing a park that seems to be the very best of the best, and then we find out it is Dover Hill or Elm Park where we're having some current struggles, then I just want to make sure we're not deeming that publicly on camera as, okay, that's okay. I just want to make sure we're kind of like moving people around, which also encourages people to kind of get up and out into community and move in different areas and not stay so stagnant.
That's a good point. I actually like that. You got any more to add to that, Jeff? Is that okay? Go ahead, Jeff, because.
Yeah, and I, as I said, I was studying the stuff that Halifax was doing. They were quite similar. If I don't have the report in front of me, but I believe it was a 4-day maximum. And again, that was specifically parks and green spaces is what they were focused on. I didn't focus on only our green spaces. I looked at vacant lots in the industrial park. I looked at everywhere. So I think it would be a policy consideration for council to explore, largely depending on the sites. It's very possible that it may be determined that there's a site that is good for a long-term arrangement, like the little tiny houses that Fredericton did, right? So there's multiple elements here. I think if we're going to be tasked with constantly moving people, then one of the considerations that Chief Morton and I are going to have, quite frankly, is budget. You know, our bylaw officer isn't full-time, right? We would need the resources, if the council wants to make that as a policy decision, the other side of that coin is to provide us the resources we need to affect your policy decision, which is fair. I mean, that's, so we can look at that and we can do some costing and say, okay, we can bring in some extra help or whatever. What resources would we need to affect a policy like that? And have that as a discussion when we talk budget issues for 2024.
So, just one question though, like, because I know our struggle with moving people as it is. How do you like make this one 4 days, and then how do you physically move them? With what authority do you have? I guess because we know all of our other struggles we've had.
I mean, if it's when they're on our land, we do have authority over our lands, and if worst case scenario normally I think if it's a bona fide system and it's part of the social contract, right? If we're going to create this, there's going to have to be a social contract with the people that are making use of that social contract, and I like to believe that many of them would comply if our guy stopped and said, you know, hey, you need to move along. They have in other areas where we've met them, you know, and done that. There will be some that may not want to. That's what the guys with the yellow stripes on their pants they're good for helping with that. When it's our property, we have those authorities, right? So yeah, I mean, will there be Could there be challenges? Yes. Will there? Probably from time to time. But I think if there is a social contract in place and everybody knows, yep, you're going to be here. You can set up shop for a week. Like you can put those tent pegs into the ground, and because no one's going to bug you for the next week or whatever it is, you know. But a day or two before, you pay your visit. Say, hey guys, you know, time's running up. here's the next spot that we're going to let you be and not bother you, then I think it could work. I won't say it will work, but it could theoretically work.
Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, Councilor Otis?
Yeah, another thing I know in some cities too, when they do that transition of space, they actually will bring an outreach worker, because sometimes that move is overwhelming enough for people that they're kind of at their lowest point, and that's an opportunity to say, I'm sick and tired of kind of moving along. The other thing I wonder is, I'm not sure, like for me personally, I don't know how publicly comfortable I am stating which 4 to 5 properties we choose, but I think if the community knows that they're seeing an encampment at a particular space and they're confident that they can expect it to move within the next week or so, it might just be a more strategic way to go about it. Because I think if we say, here are the exact 5 properties out loud in public, that may insinuate like we are within that community, like, okay, we're good here. I'd rather them kind of just like end up on that land, and then we can approach and say, social contract here, we're looking at like 4 to 5 days, and here's your next option. I just wonder about what council thinks about, I kind of like the blind list, and I'm not opposed to keeping it blind and having that just be information that our protective services know. And that the community generally knows that no encampment will last longer than 4 to 5 days, and that we have maybe the bylaw officers in place to continue to support us in enforcing that. That's just an idea, but I just don't know. I know in other municipalities they sometimes struggle when they've said, okay, this space is deemed the space, and then it becomes the space, and then it becomes very challenging for people to kind of get used to moving.
Oh, hey, Earl, or Councilor Eastman, floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, just to, a question to Jeff there. How many of these properties can house about 50 tents? Do you guys get me?
So sorry, Councilor Eastman. I was trying to recall the properties in my mind as best I could. It would reduce this number pretty significantly. Yes.
Yeah. So that's if you're looking at an outlining of 40 plus people, you got to take a look at that area of what you can house, right? I know I planned camps in the military for 600 troops, so I mean I understand the logistics behind this. It's difficult. But if you've got a start number, like say 50 tents, then that reduces your properties that you're looking at. And then you got to choose the best one from that group to sustain it. You're going to look at dumpsters for garbage. You're going to have to look at a water source, to provide or where they can get their water from. An ablution area, so that you're not having defecation across the friggin' wherever the property is. So, it's a lot of work, but you can narrow this down really considerably.
Yeah, no, good points, Councilor Eastman. Yeah, okay. Yeah. No.
Jeff, just a question to make sure I get it clear in my mind. So we'll take these 40 tents or so that Earl was just mentioning. Now, is that every week we'll be pulling up stakes on 40 tents, or just ones that come in the first day, the second day, the third day? Like, are we going to pull 40 tents up and transport them with water supplies and outhouses and things to another property, and then pull it up again the next week and go like, do we have enough
No,
to
you
do?
can't.
Do we have enough to do 52 weeks? Okay.
I just want to clarify something first. We're not deciding anything right now. So we're only talking about possibly moving them. So yeah, that might be a reason not to. But that we're only in the discussion stage right now. That's very well, that's a good point, Brian. Okay, someone starting to hit a mic over there.
I'll just answer the question.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, I think Councillor Eastman's proposal is more permanent than that. When you're getting to that big of a setup, which is, it certainly has merit. If we can find a location that works, The concept using the Halifax model is small numbers. Actually, within their program, they restrict the number that can co-locate in any one spot at any one time for health and safety reasons and various other things. So, there's two different approaches. Set up an encampment, semi-permanent encampment almost, or just have those areas of amnesty where, the small groups can be. Pros and cons to both, obviously. Servicing the area, much better if it's co-located, things like that. But small groups tend to not be as obvious and impactful on the day-to-day community, and if it is something in a visible area. Again, I guess my defense is outside of Councillor Eastman's great point about the geographic size of the lot, which should have been part of this evaluation to a degree. I wasn't, I didn't feel like I was tasked with designing the entire program at this stage. It was, do we have land that might be available or might be suitable? The next, as we go down the road, obviously, like Councillor Eastman suggested, can we reduce this list down by how many, instead of saying, can we put 40 on there, you could turn the question and say, theoretically, how many could you put on this site, right? And that could be another column, and we could say, given certain criteria, we figured this one's good for 5, 3, 10, 30, and that would add another layer of information that would be valuable to you as we're trying to identify whether we have suitable sites and would address program issues of, are we constantly moving, or are we doing something where we're bringing in some kind of cistern for water and porta potties and da-da-da-da-da in one location. So that's both sides of that comment are really good for us to take away and refine this work a bit. Won't take us so much time to do that. We could probably have something back to the council meeting in a couple weeks to keep this discussion rolling.
You got something else, Councilor Eastman, or?
No, I'm
Uh-oh.
just agreeing with Jeff.
Okay, good. Yeah, so, we also got to understand, too, is we can, what's that? Oh, Sean still wanted to go. I'll just finish up. We also, we have no control over who goes on private land if they're allowed. So that's, I'm trying to think of these numbers, when you hear these big numbers, you think, oh my goodness, but, yeah, so, but we have no control over who stays on someone else's property. So we can only offer this one, and hopefully but if the services are there for them, they probably would want to be there. But I'm going to stop talking now and let Sean go. Go ahead, Sean.
Thank you, Your Worship. Something we need to consider is, like any large group, not all of these people are going to get along. So they're not all going to want to live together. You take 50, 60 people, there are groups within the group. So that needs to be taken into consideration, that we may have to look at multiple locations with smaller numbers in order to avoid, fights, arguments, whatever. So there's that dynamic as well that has to be considered, because there are groups within the groups, and some get along and some don't.
I would have a hard time understanding how we would, have this model here and say this is for this group and this for this group. That'd be a challenge.
I think what happened with him.
But, so go ahead, Jeff.
They'll figure that out on their own, I guess. Basically, if we have 3 or 4 spots, Group A is going to be over on Lot A, and maybe we are rotating. Okay, well, you've had your turn at Lot A, now you got to go over to Lot B, and but I don't think we can be doing that every 4 or 5 days. Maybe on a longer term, but there's a lot to consider, and we're not going to figure that out tonight. But we do have to consider the dynamics of the group, and that has to be a consideration.
Councilor Cornish.
I know it's probably premature, but all this stuff's been premature, but considering, let's call them migrant, like say we have 40 today, by putting up a tent city, we'll call it, lack of a better word right now, we could be attracting people from other areas. How are you going to control that? Just a question, because I don't know, and you probably don't know. But if we could end up, rather than 40, by having a nice tent city, we could end up having 100. So that's just a comment. Oh, I don't have to touch that, do I?
Go ahead, Councilor Otis.
The one thing I'll say in my experience, and if you look at evidence around substance use, is people are actually much more likely to seek recovery or seek housing if there is a connection. And so the good thing about having multiple spaces is people who are chronically homeless are a bit different than people who are more recently homeless. So somebody who's been on the street first time experiencing homelessness for 2 months, they have a very, very high likelihood of being rehoused and having the opportunity to actually maintain their housing. Some people are not at a place where they can maintain their housing because they just don't have the skills, and things happen along the way with finances and other things. So if Sean, like, the good thing is being connected to this land, and the outreach worker, who, like, some of the service providers in our community right now have no clue where anyone is because they're all scattered. But if there are 4 to 5 lots, then it's really great if, you know, Sean's talking to someone who goes, I actually just lost my apartment 2 weeks ago because I hadn't paid rent for 6 months. He can say, okay, this is 2 weeks fresh. Like, that's an opportunity, rather than them being scattered and getting stuck in that cycle. So there is a pro to, like, partnering with community service providers as well, to say, like, we're doing our best as a municipality to have different opportunities to know where people are at. But I do really like the idea of finding spots, like knowing that maybe if Dover Hill's an option, having a limit on the tents. Like, I really like that idea of Dover Hill 10, Elm Park 5, like whatever it is. I'm just throwing numbers out, but that to me is a very easy way to control it, because then, you know, if there's already 10 there and 5 more people show up, they'll say, hey man, like, we're already at our limit, like, you should really head on down the road. Or Sean can say that as well. So, but the bylaw officer thing, I really think we should look at that, because if we have someone just doing part-time right now, like, I just don't want protective services to have to spend all their time kind of managing this. I don't think we're going to attract any more people than we already have. And when you talk to Moncton and St. John, they think we're sending them there. So every community right now is like, you need to stop. Fredericton says people are coming from St. Stephen all the time. So it's not, we're just in a housing crisis, and that's the bottom line. And we're not going to attract anything more than we already have. But encampments, you know, are almost on their way out. Like, we're getting into winter, so we're going to be past people staying outside, period, and it's going to change anyway. So we need to be looking at not only the summer, but supporting other organizations who are looking at winter, because people need shelter in the winter, and they will seek shelter, and it's not going to be a tent on a lawn. It's going to be someone's property. So we do need to support organizations who are looking at warming centers as well, and I think we need to consider as council how we can support those organizations with land. If they approach us and say, you know, we have some housing development that we'd like to pursue, we need to, like, really consider that, so that we're not stuck with people breaking in all winter long. And that's all I got to say.
Go ahead, Jeff.
There's good comments by Councillor Otis. They are a length of the way down the path of program design. You know, great that you're thinking down the road. Obviously, you know, you're on step 86 and we're on step 2, but it's good. But I think that's where the Community Safety Committee is also going to be able to play a role of, you know, this, as a local reporter asked me about this discussion before today, this won't be in place for this winter or this summer. We know that. But if we can take the winter to identify locations, identify what program criteria we want, and we're ready to roll come spring, we're that much more prepared than we've ever been before, and hopefully, you know, it makes an impact on the experience of the citizenry across the municipality, and because we've been chasing, we've been behind the 8 ball and stuck, and this is our opportunity to. We've started this process. We can actually get ahead of the curve a little bit, hopefully, and have a plan in place for next summer. Winter shelter is going to be an issue. Chief Morton and I have had some brief conversations with some, you know, a little bit polite word would be innovative approaches that I've been mulling over and scribbling on my notepad about in the event that there's a gap in the service level this winter. But that's a kind of a different conversation. So I think here we're early stages, but early stages of a very important journey.
My honor. Go ahead, Councilor Cornish.
Earl, back to the old days when we had large tents and big fields for the military. In your opinion, would it be better to have 15 or 20 individual tents of different qualities, or would it be better to have something like the military may have excess large tents where you could house 30 people?
You mean that as a group within one tent?
Yes.
No. No, I wouldn't go for that. You know, military guys are forced into that, but you're not gonna force these guys into big, what we used to call a bat tent, a big ass tent.
Language.
I remember them, Earl. Thank you very much.
All right. Yeah, so I know I'm probably jumping around down the road to item 84 here, but I'm also thinking about maintaining the parks, if we so choose. Like we've got students mowing and doing flowers, we'd have to really think about those things, and our citizens that may still want to use the park. So I'm going to make sure that we consider all those things, and I know we are. That's how you got it rated, but just make sure we're considering it. Okay. Yep. Go ahead, Jeff.
In an effort to wrap this up before we have the entire program designed, which wouldn't be a bad thing. But so I think that from what I gather, the takeaway is to add another criteria level as far as geographic size and capability to support how many units, and bring that back. Again, we'll do another. We'll keep it blind, but we'll add an extra criteria. Is there? So my question would just be: is there anything else that you want us to bring into play alongside that, or if we just add that column and bring that back, is that sufficient for the next round of discussion?
Okay, Councilor Wright.
Thank you. When we're talking about accessibility of social services and degree to which site safety could be established, are we talking about the whole gamut, like fire services and police and ambulance accessibility, all of that in the event that we're emergency? That's already factored into these sites, these locations, correct?
Jeff?
There we go. Yeah, when it came to accessibility, it's accessibility of vehicles getting in and out to do garbage collection, to do fire response, to do ambulance response. That's part of the evaluation. As far as access to social services, generally speaking, you could probably consider that a bit of a adjudication of geographic distance from the core. The further out, the worse of a ranking it would have got. So if it's up, we own property up at Maxwell Crossing. If it's out there, the ability of those individuals to access core needs in town would be very low. Whereas if it's property that we happen to own on King Street across just over here, it would be quite high, right? Because it's the services are right here. So that's kind of how the approach was.
No, go ahead, Councilor Islett.
League or everything here, but wouldn't the conversations after this go towards that public safety committee? Wouldn't that be, because we were going to go and task them with doing some of this, what we're looking at today, and we've had the initial conversation on it, and if we set that other criteria, then they could bring us back a recommendation. So we're not taking this to council every 2 weeks or every month as a committee of the whole. Wouldn't it just go to them and then say, this is what council set out first of all, and this is the criteria, and this is they recommend to do this, and then it's there. They can go through the criteria and see what would be suitable, and then have a recommendation to council about that? Because we're gonna have 2 or 3 councillors on that anyway, that'll keep it in that direction, so we're not talking about it every 2 weeks, that we're just getting a recommendation probably a month or whatever, right? That's just a suggestion, but I think that'd be the easier and the less, then we've already talked about this for 20 minutes now and got it all designed, or half an hour, right? So, I mean, so, anyway.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point. All right. So do you think you got enough then to?
Yeah, I would say it's probably at this stage, might be a good recommendation that the material be refined and presented to the Community Safety Committee for further discussion and evaluation. I think that's a really good suggestion, and if that's the consensus of Committee of the Whole, we will refer the matter over to the Standing Committee.
Easy peasy. Tough discussions, folks. Yes. Never thought I'd be sitting here talking about this stuff, to be honest. All right, let's step ahead to draft parks bylaws. Yeah, as everyone's all seen the package there, but yeah, you want to give us the crib notes there? Go ahead, Jeff.
I'll just say that Mr. Sumner wanted to put this on the last council agenda. As you recall, it was actually in his report that it was done and drafted, but we had to do another look there. And we did modify a few things. This draft has been also shared with Sergeant McKenzie at the RCMP after a meeting that the mayor and I had with him. One of the things we talked about was our parks bylaw and how antiquated the current one is. And so we sent it over for him to review. He got back to Kev today saying that he thought it was quite good. He had a couple of suggestions on the penalty provisions that we're going to tune in a little bit. But he thought it covered the things that he needed to have, that he wanted to have in his pocket as far as being able to assist with individuals that are in parks after dark without permission and things like that. So we wanted to bring it here, let you guys have an early look before it hits the council agenda. And I will say, since I have the microphone, Mr. Sumner would have been here to discuss this directly with you, but he's celebrating his wedding anniversary. So happy anniversary to Kevin and Louise.
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Islip.
I don't know what the verbiage on this. The council may appoint a director of community services who shall be responsible, the chief administration officer. It's kind of, it's just a blank.
I'm just pulling it up.
Yeah, I just don't, I don't know where that's going is to.
Page 13 of the package.
It's in the bylaw, and it just kind of full stops there. I don't know what is that. They're providing okay, you're appointing a community director to take on the responsibilities of the chief administration officer in this bylaw, or?
What section of the bylaw are you looking at?
Just the page 2 of the bylaw, very top thing, number 2, or 3, sorry, under general.
Mine's still loaded.
This probably has to do with it.
And the other question was on that's one of them. And the other question was on the bicycle part there. There's also I just bought a new e-bicycle, so you should probably include that verbiage now too, where they have that, right? So, and I thought there was helmets were mandatory everywhere in town, and not just parks or anything like that. So I wasn't sure what that was.
The only bylaw we have in place is in the parks.
It's just in the parks, okay.
That maybe we want to look at that, but.
Yeah, okay, I just wasn't sure about that. That was just a question on that, and, yeah.
Okay, we'll take,
So that number 3, there doesn't, just kind of full stops, it doesn't really say anything, and then about bicycles, you might want to change it to other, or if they're using those powered scooters and everything too, they should be wearing helmets and all those things, and it only says bicycle, so if you limit yourself out to that, then somebody could get hurt with a kid on a skateboard using the trail park or whatever, right, so.
I mean,
Be more aware of that
oh,
now, where I'm on bicycle.
Yeah, I mean, you could take care of that in the definitions too. And my thoughts on the appointment of the director is probably so they can help enforce the bylaw under his authority. Yeah. Yeah. I got you. Yep. I mean, that's how I interpret it, but you're right. It has to say it. I got you. Okay. Councilor Wright.
Hi, I know in committee can't debate, but I'm just going to point at something I highlighted when I was reading it before the meeting. Number 7 on that very same page says, "No person shall hold a public gathering or meeting in a park unless authorized by the chief administrative officer or their designate." So I would want some clarification on what that means before I would feel like, what does public gathering defined? So I guess that's just my comment to bring back when we actually are able to debate it.
Yeah. But it is good to have that in there because you may have, and we've had this happen just recently, 2 separate gatherings want to go to the park and just think they just go to the park and have their 2 separate gatherings, and all of a sudden they clashed. So if it goes through some sort of a governance and it's done. But go ahead, Councilor.
No, I was just meaning that's kind of why I was saying what defines a public gathering, because if it's just me and my huge extended family going to have a picnic at the park, like, or is it, if I want to gather a group of friends and we all sit there and talk politics, is that a public meeting? So just have it for those reasons. So that's why I was saying I would like to see that fleshed out a little more, defined before, as part of the debate when we're actually debating it. Thanks.
Yeah, I understand that more, actually, now that you say that, yes. Okay. Yes, go ahead, Councilor Greenlaw.
Just kind of a housekeeping thing, but when we make a change to a bylaw like this, like when it's in the package, we should state the reason that we're changing the bylaw, what the objective is to change the bylaw, right, rather than just we're changing the bylaw. So that's all I had.
Yeah, absolutely. When it goes to council, there'll be a cover report from staff talking about why we're updating it and what the updates actually are and the comparison and stuff like things like that. Yeah.
All right. So next up, item number 5, the last item, is the winter roads from Jim Tech. Well, there we go. I will too. This is right up your alley. Go ahead, Sean.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, as you guys are familiar with, Gemtech come down and gave a number of reports with a number of recommendations, and the particular one that we're talking about is winter road maintenance, and in further, particularly salt versus sand. So I guess what we need to work out, I mean, we can apply more salt, we can apply less sand, but we need a little bit of guidance as to the level of service and where those levels of services are going to be applied to. So just for reference, so people understand, like King Street, Milltown Boulevard, Church Street, Pleasant Street, those Prince William, those main arteries are pretty much exclusively salt already. From time to time, they'll get some sand, but the vast majority of what they get is salt already. Some of your side streets that don't have a lot of traffic don't get as much salt. They're more sand. So we already have undefined levels of distinct levels of service within the community. So I guess what we need is a more defined level of service breakdown, and so that we can, make a plan and budget accordingly. So obviously, I just want to introduce you to that concept so that maybe you can think about that a little bit, and then we'll come back and break it down, and maybe we have to go street by street or neighborhood by neighborhood or whatever, but come up with that plan and then move forward with it. That's kind of where we're at. Question.
Councilor Rodas.
I think the tricky one for me is probably knowing from your standpoint, like if we went full-blown salts like they recommended, you know, even in a very widespread area to start out with, just to see how effective it is and not, you know, skip out on streets and just choose a huge area. Do you think that, like, from your perspective, infrastructure-wise, can our town vehicles handle the wear and tear of that change for like a large area? Or do you feel like, you know, to pilot it, it would be better to choose like one specific part of town where we don't even skip out on side streets, we just do one large area? Like, just in terms of infrastructure, do we need to take this in, you know, step by step in baby steps, or do you think we even have capacity to say, let's just trial it all of Ward 2, or let's trial it all of Ward, you know?
I mean, spread salt, spread sand, it's the same equipment. We won't need any more or less. Salt is harder on the equipment, but the sand has salt in it, so that it doesn't freeze. So if we were to move more towards salt, then we'll probably maybe we will see more maintenance related to it. There's a lot to it, and I don't have all the answers. I've talked to my crew a fair bit, and they've experimented with this some in the past, and they have their opinions, but they're willing to try and do whatever it is we suggest they do. We're not gonna. I don't want you to be misled and think that if we just use sand or salt on Pine Street, for example, that we won't have to sweep Pine Street ever again. You could probably sweep Pine Street right now, right? We have, Dave and I were talking about this the other day, like there's parts of town that could use a good sweeping right now after rainfall events. So there's more to it than just the sand that we put down in the winter. We're always gonna have to sweep, and but there is some room to play with this and see if we can make improvements and reduce the amount of sand. Obviously, you put less down, you still got to go over it, but that's less truckloads that are going somewhere, and it will make it more efficient and possibly more cost effective. But we won't completely eliminate the need.
Yeah, I mean, isn't there not times that we do need sand when at the low
Yes,
at the low temperature?
Works to a certain
Yeah.
temperature, and
Yeah.
so there are times when you'll see us put sand on the boulevard
Yeah.
in King Street, because once you drop below, you start getting down around 10 or 12 below zero, salt doesn't burn. It will once the temperature comes back up, so it's there, and it's getting ground in, and when the temperature comes up, it melts. But in the meantime, you have to have salt on there, so everybody's not crashing into each other at the sliders and intersections. So you'll never completely get away from it, but we can reduce it.
Councilor Heislop?
Just share a couple thoughts here, my thoughts on it. When they initially said that, I said, oh, yeah, well, that sounds really good. And then I started doing some plastering at my house. And I did a lot of research online about what should I use and everything. And the guy said, well, don't spend more money on that light stuff, the light dust stuff, because you're still going to have to clean the furniture. Still going to clean the furniture. It doesn't matter, So that was one thing. But the other thing was when I first heard that, I thought it would be maybe a good idea in those courts, like in the court areas, because there were so many complaints about that. Because once the sand gets in there, it stays in those courts. It doesn't get dragged out, doesn't get dragged along, or and we've had complaints about that historically in the past. I think even before, when I was just sitting in on council meetings, where there was a lot of people coming towards saying, listen, is there any way to reduce the amount of salt? Can you go and, I think we talked about it too in that technical committee that we did, right? Yeah. And the same thing is reducing the amount, but if you just put no salt or no sand on it, then maybe that would be. But then how do you logistically do that with your trucks? You're going to change. I mean, they're loaded up to go. They're not going to go, oh, hold on now, I got to go fill back up. I only fill up,
That's part of the
right? That's part of the consideration there too, right? Is to do one area, but maybe it's to do that one area that had the courts in there to test out, see how it works. Because I know they're like a dust bowl in the spring, right? So and it doesn't go anywhere; it just stays there. So anyway, it's my thoughts anyway.
Okay. Councilor Greenlaw?
So no equipment upgrades are required for this? What we have will work?
Well, not directly related to this, we need equipment upgrades, not just because we're going from salt to sand or sand to salt. Yes. There are some recommendations in there when we buy new, the bigger plow trucks to put the Dickie John, they call them, or whatever, that's a brand name, spreaders and things like that, that can help. But, I mean, I'm told that they basically have them set on the lowest settings now, right? Because that's one of the things, well, we've got an expert out there that calls us every time we plow and tells us to turn the thing down, and well, it's at zero, like, it's zero or on, right? So it's, there are rooms for improvement that way, and we will, as we upgrade equipment, upgrade the technology.
Okay, and then cost, like, obviously, we're gonna have to buy more salt.
Salt is more expensive than
So,
sand.
so there will be a budget impact there, but you gotta have sand anyway.
We do.
So if we started this and it was not working, we would have enough sand, we could go back to the old.
We'll make
method.
sure there's enough sand there, yeah. Sand you can carry over, right? Salt, we don't keep a large volume of salt, we just bring it as we need it. Part of the reason is we don't have room to hold it, but it doesn't store as well either, so.
Councilor Rodas?
So if this is a true pilot and we just treated it as if we have like a control group, like the salt side of it, could we not maybe even just have you bring forward like 2 regions with similar traffic, similar streets in town, and do one with just salt and one with sand and salt, and measure if there's truly a difference? So, if you're saying like Union Street is a main street or Pleasant Street, some of these, so almost like dividing 2 sections and giving it a trial run on both, and then coming back to us after the spring and just saying like, we really didn't find a big significant change. And would that help too with the trucks, like when you're loading them, if you know that you're just gonna do one section with salt and sand and one section with just salt, but I feel like you would probably know which streets are the best. Maybe that includes a couple courts, and we can just trial it in 2 areas, and then you can come back and say, I really didn't think that made a huge difference. I mean, they tried it in a city, and I just feel like I think they trialed it in a city, if I'm correct, the Gem Tech. So even that is different. Like, we're in a rural area, and our traffic is different, and there are lots of streets that really don't get much traffic at all, and there are others that get huge amounts of traffic. So I just don't know that for them, they might have seen like a very significant impact that we might not experience. So maybe just 2 kind of sections, and I don't know, that's just a suggestion to look at it.
Okay, Councilor Greenlaw?
So, like, I think it's great you're coming to us, but really I see this as an operational thing, and I think you guys should just do what yeah. So.
Yeah, I was just gonna make.
Other than the budget impact, right?
Go ahead.
I was just going to make a comment that Gem Tech, they did say that council needed to set the policy for the staff because it was a policy change. So I agree. I'm sitting here going like, you could just try it, but at the same time, I understand that the change in the policy is set by council. So unfortunately, we are going to have to vote on that at a council meeting at some point, probably.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Sean.
In support of my staff, I think my staff think that they're doing what's best already. So if you ask them to do what they think is best, they're going to say, we are. And that's fair, because they're not, oh, we're going to throw sand here because we don't like you. No, they're doing what works for them. They know. They're out there. What we need to do is say, what is our level of expectation? It's kind of like when I spoke with you, Wade, you asked about what the level of service was in the rural areas, and I directed you to, if you're this class of road, you should expect this. That's kind of where we're going with this. So if we're going to change things, then people's expectations may have to change to match it, and we will need the support of you if we're going to do that, because, if we say, we're gonna put salt over here. Well, we're gonna have to wait till a truck that has salt on it is available to go there. Whereas before, they might have got it sooner because the truck that's in that area carries sand. Okay, so there will be some logistical things, and people may notice changes that they don't like. So we'll need the support to carry this out, and that comes down to level of service, level of expectation. That's your role.
I'm sold, Sean. You just sold it. But go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I think, and the other thing to keep in mind too is we know this stems from the same conversation we've had every year since I've been here and probably long before I got here, which is the spring cleanup of the sand. That is the driving force behind some of these changes. Yes, operational costing is, if we can get more efficient, we can get a bit cheaper, great, that's, we can do that. But if we do some pilots and we're not finding a substantial change, the flip side of that coin is we start investing in cleanup side, right? As we say, the sand's the sand. It's going to be what it is. But it's obvious to me from the Facebook messages and the emails and everything that I get every spring, and then you guys all get it too, that there's a certain satisfaction level relating to the sand being on the roads in the spring and how long it takes to clean it cleaned up. And the satisfaction is not very high right now amongst our citizens. So it may be we try this for this winter, we try a couple of things, say yes, we see a substantial change, no we don't. If the answer is no we don't, then we're back, okay, do we try the other side of it? Are we going to start investing on the other side of the coin and say, yep, we got the one loader with the brush and we got this, what else do we need to bring into play so that it's not July and then we're still trying to sweep up streets, because it's a huge frustration for the citizens, which makes it a huge frustration for you, and it makes a huge frustration for us. I mean, we would all like to have it done in a week, like that, but we don't have the resources to do that. So you can see this kind of concept as, let's try what will end up being the cheaper route, if we can do some operational changes, before you're sitting here with a bunch of with staff saying, all right, we need a street sweeper and we need 3 staff and we need, in order to hit the target goals for the community. So that's kind of where we're at. Like, let's try the operational one that we can control without putting a whole bunch of taxpayer money now, to see if we can figure out something. And then if it doesn't work, well, we'll look at it from the spring side and the cleanup side, and how do we get more efficient on that side.
Okay, on another note, that's only one little piece of this puzzle here. So like, we got lots of things like talking about wingmans and all that kind of stuff that can help the end results as well. So,
That's all we were focusing on.
oh, is it?
Was sand salt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
The report was there just to give you the background for why we
Oh, okay.
were bringing it up. Don't have to go through the whole report.
No. It might be the lesser of the two evils, and you just have to have sand. But yeah, go ahead, Councillor Heisler.
Yeah, I was just, also, maybe we might find that there is a reduction in dust or something on that side. I know before I was on council, I remember I suggested about going from one side of town one year, one side of town the next year, so only half the people are angry for an extra month, right? That's what Councillor Maxwell said. He says only half the people are mad at us. And it has worked a little bit, it has reduced the thing, but also that might change the way that works then, if it's really a low dust area on one side, if it works with the sand. It's mostly the fines anyway that get up in the air, right? So, but if it does work that way, then we can start from one end of town and then have those people happy on the other end of town until the cleanup's coming, right? Because it might be less dust, right? I don't know. But we'll find that out during the whole experiment, and it should be kind of interesting, actually.
Just a comment,
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor. Yeah, you can. Are you all done there? Go ahead.
Sean, this is just preparing for a dry run when you take over 1 and 2 wards, 1 and 3 wards.
We have no intention.
You've still got a little bit of hair left.
All right. Well, that's it, folks. Oh, how am I going to do this?
Are we done yet?
Oh, I have one comment.
Oh.
It's good.
Go ahead. Is it on the agenda?
It's brilliant.
Is it on the agenda, though? Oh, okay, go ahead.
I'd like to thank Sean and the team. There was fire near my home recently, and I was so impressed. I saw Oak Bay Fire, St. Stephen Fire, 2 police cars, like within, honestly, minutes. So I just want to thank you. I'm super impressed by the work that you do. I've never actually witnessed a fire happen or watched firefighters run into flames before, and I sat outside and watched it for the first time, and I just really want to say thank you to every single firefighter out there coming together, supporting that particular individual. It was really hard to watch, but the bravery that you show, I couldn't do it, so thanks so much.
I'm going to add it, and you can add that after. I'm going to jump on this because, like I said, we watched that together, and I was impressed. And don't forget, Callis was there as well. Okay, but what was really impressive is how all the different teams were there, but the way the leadership and control of that team, it's just like a switch turns on, and you guys are all in a certain gear. And I was so impressed with how the communicating going on and who's got it was like so well controlled. It was. So hats off to you and your team and all the other teams around you. So thank you. So I'll let you say your word.
Well, thank you to everybody for that, and thank you for mentioning Callis. Callis, like a lot of times, we're the first firefighters through the door with our guys, and it did go well. We do have a good team. That was not during normal working hours, so I'm 25 minutes away, but we have a great team, and that's not an issue. I say this, I'm there do you need coffee? Do you need literally? Allie and the rest of the officers do their job, and they do it well.
That was a good one, so thank you. I'm glad you've remembered that because I forgot all about it. It was handled so well that you didn't have to have a discussion about it. That's the really beauty of it. But I must let people know that we are thinking of the gentleman. I don't want to bring his name up here in council, but it was pretty close to home. That's for sure. Okay. I don't have my favorite adjournment person here tonight, but can I have a mover and a seconder to adjourn the meeting? Councilor Heislip? Councilor Cornish? All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good night.